it is important to be able to look into the eyes of a man and say, I am here, and recognize that.
This is from 8 years ago. This is this woman, her name, Obaid-Chinoy. This is her talking about, Jon Stewart's interviewing her, and you'll recognize a couple other people on the panel, talking about what her intentions are when she gets a film in her hands.
What is the balance of activating a force for change, but also trying to permeate that patriarchy, that power structure? And is that a part of the calculation of your art as well? And what's been the reaction to that?
Oh, absolutely. I like to make men uncomfortable. I enjoy making men uncomfortable. Not you, just not you. Not you.
Point taken, point taken.
But, it is important to be able to look into the eyes of a man and say, I am here, and recognize that. And recognize that I am working to bring something that makes you uncomfortable, and it should make you uncomfortable, because you need to change your attitude. And it's only when you're uncomfortable, when you're shifty, when you have to have difficult conversations, that you will perhaps look at yourself in the mirror and not like the reflection, and then say, maybe there is something wrong with the way I think, or maybe there is something wrong with the way I am addressing this issue.
Andy, I remember when I was 5 years old, the first time I saw Star Wars, and I went into the bathroom after and I stared in the mirror for like an hour, and I said, you're a horrible person, Dave. You're a boy. You're just They're killing everything. And by the way, Jon Stewart, you got to break the patriarchy. Like, what a cuck. That's what they say, a cuck, yeah.
So my reaction after seeing some of these interviews of this female director, I wasn't familiar with her before, is the arrogance that one has to have to feel that, to be quite openly careless about. She's been handed this legacy of this film franchise that has taken decades and decades to build, has millions of fans around the world. I mean, personally, I'm not a Star Wars fan, so it doesn't personally mean a lot to me, but I know through friends and throughout people in my life growing up how much it has meant to them. And, we haven't seen the film that, and we won't for a long time until it comes out, which she ultimately makes, but people should be concerned that somebody who has this history of saying these things, of having a political, philosophical agenda in her work, is now been handed this huge franchise with this legacy. I just think, first off, that it's really hugely disrespectful to the fans, and I think it speaks to the lack of leadership, I think, from Disney and how they've handled huge, their brand. I mean, we saw with the live action of Snow White, with their lead for the Snow White actress saying all these things, essentially crapping all over the first Disney film that made Disney have the legacy it had today. For her to dismiss it in these interviews about how it was essentially a bad film and that Snow White was a bad character, it's so we see the arrogance coming from not just actors in films, which is unfortunately to be expected, but also from directors.
And by the way, Disney announced a few years ago, when they got both Star Wars and Marvel, that they were going to push Star Wars to be more for young girls and the Marvel universe to be more for young boys. So that is a type of social engineering, isn't it, Colin?
Yeah, absolutely. This is all part of like a bigger pattern that you see like happening in so many different institutions, where they take an institution that has this legacy, this history, this earned prestige, and then the activists just at the 11th hour hop in the driver's seat, commandeer the whole thing just to use as a megaphone to spout their own ideologies. and undermine the entire legacy that's there. We see this with the ACLU. We're seeing this with Harvard. How all this prestige they had, now they're just spouting racialist ideologies. Star Wars is doing this now. We've seen medical institutions do this. This is just part of the broader activist narrative of sort of taking over the institutions and commandeering them to their own ends. And I mean this is a pattern that we're seeing, and it's going to keep going, and hopefully we can start pushing back against this. And I think again at the box office, this is where ultimately it's going to get the pushback that it deserves.
Right, the pushback is the key part. So I mentioned there were some wins. So it's a win for Claudine Gay to have resigned. I think there's a reaction win in this Star Wars story. There was nobody out there like, this is a great idea. Everybody was pushing against it. We'll see ultimately what the movie will look like.